And there are some ideas that someone could say, you go to a brewery, some breweries have restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine that with meat production in the future, you could be in a brewery that is on one side, the tanks that have yeast and everything that are brewing the beer. And then on the other side, you've got the cells that are being cultured and cultured into meat. Mm-hmm. And those things are being produced and sort of given to you on the table. And that's not that strange.
It's DeAndre here, and this is the Pioneers Show, the show where we talk with innovators, makers, entrepreneurs, basically people who are trailing their own trails and creating their own lives, so that we all can learn how to work on our own lives. If this is your first time here, thank you for downloading and listening, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear this episode. Subscribe and enjoy listening to the Pioneers of today. If you're a repeat listener, welcome back. This is episode 29, and I'm your host, André Delquer. You can find me at It's DeAndre on Twitter, as well as the show at Pioneers Show on Instagram. This podcast was never meant to be focused on any specific topic besides technology. The truth is, somehow I've been getting more and more interested in topics such as health or the future of work. Not by design, but mostly because these are the matters that are affecting me personally right now. In this episode, I interview someone that is in the intersection of worlds that I am deeply passionate about: entrepreneurship, career shifting, health, and accelerators. Munya Chivasa is a scientist turned patent lawyer turned consultant turned accelerator head for the Merck Group, one of the longest standing health and pharma groups in the world. Interested already? I'm sure you are, and we go over topics such as organ printing, livestock-free meat production, and the future of healthcare worldwide, not only the biggest prizes, but biggest hubs of innovation. I was really impressed by Munya, and I want to share this conversation with you. Welcome to the show, Munya. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Andre. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. It's a great pleasure. And first of all, I would like to thank Piabo PR with Nora Welbeck for arranging this conversation. Probably, we already figured this out. There would be a chance that we probably could have met eventually because of so many people that we've had on the podcast and apparently that we know. But we'd like to, first of all, thank Piabo PR for arranging this conversation. So, Munya, for people who have no idea who you are, care to give us a presentation?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Munya. I'm heading the Merck Accelerator. I'm Zimbabwean, and I've been living in Germany for the last 9 years or so. I've in a past life, I was a biochemist and a pharmacologist, tried to transition out of that, going through intellectual property, trying to become a patent attorney. That didn't work out well for me. So I ended up in tech transfer, so working where academia meets enterprise, essentially. Did that for a number of years in the UK. Before coming into Germany, where I worked in consultancy, basic innovation management. That led me to Merck, who was setting up a group innovation unit called the Innovation Center, where I've been since 2015. And during my stay here, I've been responsible for setting up our accelerator program as well as the Innovation Center itself, together with a very, very good team. And we've grown quite a bit since 2015, now mostly trying to figure out how we can build collaborations between the startups that have a very good link with Merck and some of the business units as well as the innovation projects that we work on in the Innovation Center. So we're building a platform for collaboration, essentially.
Very interesting. And I have to ask this. So you went from neuropharmacology eventually to patent lawyer. So how did that came to be?
Oh yeah, okay. That's a slightly long story. So my dad back in the day used to work for the African Intellectual Property Organization, a body called ARIPO. And as a kid, I was always interested in sort of the papers that I knew dad's bag, right? So trying to understand what's going on there. He was in finance and administration, but it opened up a door to me to realize that there are a lot of scientists who are not working as scientists. And there were a group of people who specialized in science and in law and found a home in between. And that fascinated me for a while. And so when I pursued my science degree and when I started working in a lab, I slowly realized that the life in the lab is great, but I'm not one built for it. Okay. But I still wanted to be close to the science, and patent law was one of the first things that sort of came to me. at the time. So I pursued that direction. So not straying too far away from the science, but not necessarily living it on a day-to-day.
So not being necessarily the scientist with the lab coat, but also being part of the conversation, but being far away as possible, being far away enough that you don't have to live it every day and have to deal with the stresses and the burnout that it might come with it, right?
No, absolutely, yeah. Because the idea is, right, so you're in a lab. Most scientists are looking for that one discovery, right? So that and sort of to really sort of using experimentation to test out theories and come up with that spark. And I kind of felt like patent attorneys are the ideal place, right? Because once the inventor or the scientist comes up with a spark, one of the first things they're going to go to is a patent attorney to make sure that their invention is protected. So I felt like every day in a patent attorney's life could be that someone comes with a spark, someone comes with a great idea, and you're constantly sort of in that wave of high of discovery, right? So it felt like the ideal career for me.
Well, apparently it was not. I'm sorry.
No, so in good reason. So I love patent attorneys, but I think you end up writing a lot more letters between you and the examiner than hearing new discoveries.
Okay. And how did you go from that part to? So remind me again. You went from neuropharmacology.
So it was pharmacology actually. So biochemistry and pharmacology.
Biochemistry and pharmacology to patent lawyer and then to consultant.
In the step in the middle was the critical one. I joined a tech transfer office in the UK. So Imperial Innovations is the name, close to, it's basically associated with Imperial College. And there was a really interesting approach. So most of the people most of the people know what a tech transfer office is, I assume. But the idea is in academia, a lot of people coming up with research results that they feel could be very good to commercialize. And there's a team that understand the technology, that understand the business landscape, that then go and talk to some of the inventors and some of the professors, people in academia who are doing research to really sort of identify what kind of commercialization strategies. How can you get the discoveries in the lab into market? So how can you get it to the people, basically? What kind of partnerships do you need to set up? And in many cases, it might be new ventures that have to be built. And those people in the tech transfer offices are in the front line of trying to build that first business, the business and intellectual property strategy that could actually drive basic research results into applied commercial products.
Interesting. So, this conversation actually comes at the right place because recently, and I think it was this week, that was published an interview that I did in partnership with Samsung Next that I did at Tech Open Air Berlin, and I actually interviewed a CEO and a CEO of a company that's a merge between a business that was created from a university, from the academia. They're called Oxford VR, and it's funny because I have actually introduced Barbara to them because they do VR and healthcare to the therapy. So I thought, okay, these two have to meet. And it's interesting that you were working on that. So, but you went from Zimbabwe. Were you in Zimbabwe doing the patent office, or were you already in Europe?
I was already in Europe. So that was after my master's program in London, basically. So I did my master's program at Queen Mary's College in University of London. Okay, makes sense. So, and from that point, I assume when you went from the patent officer to the tech talent transfer in this part that you just mentioned, that you got, I assume, the interest to more in this technology innovation side. That's probably where the spark might have come. That's the spark from the scientist that came to you through the tech talent. Absolutely. So, one thing that I have to appreciate about my former employer is they had a very, very interesting setup, right? So they had the tech transfer company with a business builder and a venture capital arm all in one. So you could see the whole trajectory of results from basic research lab getting into this business building effort and then actually scaling with VC funding. You could see that in one organization. And sort of that really sort of pushed me in this direction. It sort of opened up channels that I never knew existed, right? So if I was, if I had just stayed in the little bubble of science and law, sort of opening up the concept of what actually really moves the needle when it comes to pushing science-driven innovations. You need a lot of funding and you need a lot of research, and sort of that. And that bridging capital is usually extremely difficult to get, and these guys had it in one go. So it was actually
that's a very
formative.
It's a very interesting thing, and it's actually something that I also asked Valentino. But the question that I have for you is, coming from a very academic background or in the science background, how did you find the transition going from technology or from the hard sciences, from like pharmacology? Actually, is it a hard science or is it applied science?
I would say so. It's a natural science, and it is. I think it's application driven, because you can actually you can easily apply it in the pharma space.
So how was the transition going from a natural science to a very unscientific world of business and technology and innovation?
So I feel like I had very good guardrails. So I having gone from science to the business side via IP law makes for a really good transition, because you still are looking at how can you protect scientific results or technological innovations. So there's still that very good link. And then the natural step is, why am I protecting this? Because I need to commercialize it in the future. And then you're already starting to think of the commercial strategies, the business implications. So it was a stepwise approach. I think if I had taken the step that Valentino did, so that's really impressive, right? So going from I'm a biomedical engineer, I'm a biomedical scientist, and then I'm going to set up a business that's going to have commercial value. That's being thrown into the deep end. And I feel like my path was sort of slowly going from the shallow end with steps in between. There were clear immersion points, but they weren't as deep as, now run your company, figure out where you get your finance. But it was a good transition for me.
Okay, makes sense. So you weren't necessarily thrown into the wolves. You just had an easier approach to it. And you were thrown into the wolves when you went to the consultancy business, I assume.
Yes. So that was, So the client, the sort of going to serve clients, standing in front of clients was that was an eye opener, right? So because initially you in the previous part of my career, it was talking to scientists or talking to lawyers. So people you have a very good understanding of their concepts. And then being thrown into the consultancy world, you're meeting more commercially driven people who might have a science background, but who are really looking at who are very revenue driven, revenue orientated, and are really tight on the schedules in which they need to deliver certain projects. I have to say, life sciences entrepreneurship is a bit more for patient game. You know that there are quite a number of hurdles. You know that the regulator and approval processes are marked in a certain way. So you kind of understand where value inflection points are reached. But consultancy is a bit more hard-paced, fast-paced rather. So that's where things got interesting.
Are there any resources that you recommend for people who are going through this part of life? So they're going from a very natural or hard science world rather, and going more into a business perspective. I've already talked with Valentino about this, but I guess your input will also be very valuable as somebody who's not only lived through it, but I assume when we'll talk about this with the Merck Accelerator, you also help people go through this as well. So any resources that you usually recommend?
So in terms of resources, I think one very, very good resource is listening to people like you. So having people listen to your shows, they're people who've lived through this. Right? So just understanding some of the journeys that people have taken, and podcasts are great for that. There are also quite a number of blogs. out there that sort of talk about the business side of science that can slowly get you immersed into the commercial aspects of the work that you maybe work on in the lab. And one of my favorites is hackathons and startup days, startup weekends. So if you, especially in the south of Germany here, there are quite a few of these hackathons and startup weekends that are pretty much science and life science driven.
Oh, really?
You get, yeah. Heidelberg has a very good life science hackathon, life science meets IT hackathon. Here in Germany, in Darmstadt, we also run a couple of hackathons that are very much driven by challenges that are being faced by companies like Merck. Evonik, a chemicals company, also run hackathons in this part of the region as well. So you start getting the challenges that are typical, but you also get the business side of things. Why are these commercially interesting problems, even if there are technical solutions to them? So you get to interact with the mentors who provide the challenges. They give you insights into the market as they see it. They give you insights into, they get you to bridge your technical solution to a commercial business case. So and you interact with a mix of people. So for typical hackathons that we run, we encourage people who are more economics and business driven in terms of their major in university to interact with people who are more creative or who are from more of a scientific discipline. So you get this early exchange. How can you work in teams that are diverse in nature to deliver the same goal, a technological solution in prototype with a business case that comes with it, and that already gets you thinking differently.
Yeah, because you, like you said, in the science is a very slower pace because of the you have to have a lot of patience. I assume a lot of data points to be able to announce something on a science level. But on the startups, you have to produce fast, do stuff, test it out, and do a lot of things. So I agree that going through an hackathon or some kind of startup weekend or a startup event can also open a lot of eyes for people in the science community that otherwise would be pre-programmed and pre-defined to have a very slow approach. But at the same time, I wonder, and you have more experience on this, if it might not be too much of a shock, like shocking the system if it's too fast. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, that's a fair point, actually. So I have to say I've the most scientist heavy hackathon that we've had at Merck was in Israel. Okay. We've run 2 hackathons there. And people who've been running PhDs, who've been doing PhDs, took time out to spend a weekend to think about these problems. And to be honest, I didn't sense like they were sort of entering a culture shock, but it was actually a very pleasant surprise for them. Right? So having worked over 24 hours and then actually coming up with something they could propose was actually, it seemed as if, in my opinion, quite a good opportunity for them.
Yeah, it makes sense. Once again, eye-opening, I assume, would be the biggest, because it's such and the funny thing is that from talking to some people in science is that we might be in the same culture, but we're in so different universes in terms of application and speed of work that sometimes it can be, what the hell is just too much noise? Can everybody just please shut up and let me think?
True.
Okay. So continuing your life story still. So you went from consultant and then you got to Merck.
Yeah.
Let's assume that somebody doesn't know what Merck is.
Sure.
What is Merck?
I'll be okay. So Merck is a vibrant science and technology company with a rich history. So this year is our 351st year of existence.
Oh, wow.
Merck started off, pretty deep history there. Merck started off as a pharmacy here in Darmstadt, and in 1668. and expanded over the years to a chemicals company, sort of chemicals-driven pharmaceutical company. And I think we are the oldest pharmaceutical and chemicals company in the world. To what we are now, which is a science and technology company that has leading positions in biopharma, in life sciences, and in performance materials. Just to maybe add a bit more on the other two businesses, performance materials is our advanced chemicals business, where we provide solutions in the semiconductor industry space. We provide display solutions as well, so materials that are used in displays. So like liquid crystals, OLEDs, OLEDs and lighting, so that connection to margin. And the life science business is really sort of focused on is actually the leading provider of life science reagents, tools, and equipment in most biotech labs, whether industrial, clinical, and in some quality control labs as well. So in food and environment monitoring. And in healthcare, in the biopharma, our main therapeutic areas are oncology and immuno-oncology. We have a general medicine franchise that has cardiovascular therapies, as well as some hormone therapies as well for thyroid dysfunction. And we have a strong portfolio on fertility solutions. So supporting couples who are trying to go through in vitro fertilization.
Interesting. So you in 2015 you got to be an innovation facilitator at Merck.
That's right.
Once again, not a lot of people will understand the job role or even the name. Innovation, I get it. Yeah. Facilitator, what the hell? Innovation facilitator, what's going on? People are going crazy today. They're coming up with new job roles. What the hell's going on? So, Munya, could you just enlighten the audience?
Sure. This is a lot of this is in hindsight, right? So I'm defining this in hindsight. When I joined Merck in 2015, it was to join the Innovation Center team. And the head of the Innovation Center, Michael Gamber, was right in the middle of really founding this team. So I was the first of two hires at the time, joining a team of 3 people at the time. So Innovation Facilitator was really a catch-all name for, we're going to build this Innovation Center. We're going to figure out what processes we're going to work on. We're going to make sure that we identify interesting topics within the company where we can call for ideas, support the ideators into building these projects as entrepreneurs, and also find a way to improve, to enhance the entrepreneurial mindset within the company as well. So having a cultural, not necessarily a cultural change focus, but sort of improving the culture around innovation and the way entrepreneurship was seen. So one of the first things that we did was try to set up the structures of the Innovation Center. First in line was an ideation funnel. How do we approach employees within the company, and what kind of ideas should we be following up on? And the ideas we ended up looking into were, this is why the Innovation Center was set up in the end, building businesses between and beyond the 3 sectors. So between performance materials, life science, and healthcare, leveraging the expertise and the technologies and the know-how of the market that we have in those 3 sectors. So as an innovation facilitator, it was essentially do what needs to be done for us to build the next generation businesses.
And Merck here would work as, let's use the word facilitator once again, would work as a facilitator, not only and an investor for these businesses to flourish, but under the guard and under the experience and name of the Merck, so that they could be able to venture off but still be protected because they had somebody to fall back on if they had any trouble. Is that it?
Pretty much, yeah. So it's a group of Merck employees who make up these entrepreneurial opportunities. And it was during those early stages that we started trying to figure out how can we include external impulses through to the Innovation Center. And that's where we set up the Accelerator program. to start off with. So back then, the accelerator program was focused on looking into the digital solutions. So companies that were in sort of looking at digital solutions in our business sectors, trying to inspire and sort of provide a bit more insights to the general company as to what is possible, and also support the entrepreneurs who are working in this space, because we saw the opportunity of partnering with them at some point.
Interesting. That's very interesting. And one thing that I want to understand, because I kind of drifted off a second ago because of this. You said that you had an hackathon in Israel.
Yeah.
So
two, actually.
Two, exactly. So, and they're the most hard science ones, right? You mentioned.
That was the one with the highest quota of scientists in it.
So the question that I have for you is, how many innovation centers does Merck have?
There is one innovation center. That's the one we have here in Darmstadt, but we have two innovation hubs. Hubs, yeah. So we have two innovation hubs, one in China and one in San Francisco. So in Silicon
Makes
Valley.
sense.
And then we have incubators in Israel. So we have two incubators in Israel.
So you being in the center, let's say the central hub or the center, innovation center for Merck, you also have connections with all these hubs that are spread out throughout the world, from Middle East, China, San Francisco. You have connections so that you can also gather the information and knowledge that these hubs share between them. That's very interesting. So from your experience, is there any country, or are there any couple of countries or a number of countries that are right now in the forefront of health, or let's say the other two businesses, biopharma and chemical products and everything, that are in the forefront that you're seeing and that you have the ability to say now that probably 5 years ago you wouldn't be able to say because they're surprising?
So I'll throw in Taiwan because we recently launched an innovation lab there as well. I forgot to mention it.
No problem.
That's been a really interesting surprise for me over the last 2 years. So Taiwan, being a small country that it is, has very, very interesting convergence of the semiconductor industry and really high quality healthcare provision and education as well. And what we've started seeing is that this convergence of semiconductor industry and healthcare are leading to very, very interesting solutions for for more downstream, so for on the discovery side of healthcare. We're currently working with 4 teams that are looking at quite interesting solutions that could lead into novel companion diagnostic platforms, very low cost point of care diagnostic systems as well. Just because of this leading component of theirs in semiconductor space, and the interaction of the semiconductor experts with healthcare experts as well. So that's something that's surprising for me. But I would say Israel is still a very very advanced space when it comes to technological solutions in healthcare. Our venture arm does a lot of deal sourcing in Israel as well. But Germany is also sort of doing quite well when it comes to digital health. It's been a slow growth, but it's almost there. And I'm very, very optimistic about the UK.
Really?
Well, yeah.
Actually, it doesn't surprise that China, and you have offices in China and San Francisco, but it's interesting that you mentioned that Israel is in the front or has been a driving force in this area, because have you ever heard of the book Startup Nation?
Yes. Yeah.
So Israel is a startup nation, is a forefront not only in health, but it's in cybersecurity, it's in military tech, for other reasons, but it's one of the biggest technology hubs in Tel Aviv. It must be unbelievable. It must be like a driving, frenetic startup world there. I always wonder how it can be there.
Yeah. I think it's definitely worth a visit, and we're hoping to have at least one more session this year with our colleagues at the incubators in Israel, just to connect a bit more with the ecosystem there. But I mean, we're in these locations because they're the hotspots. Shanghai and Beijing and Guangzhou, also very interesting solutions coming out there. In fact, in China, we're looking a lot in AI-enabled healthcare, and there are quite a lot of solutions that are applications there as well that are coming from that side. San Francisco has always been interesting for tech, including health tech. Although I recently learned that places like Austin are sort of coming up with very, very interesting solutions in healthcare as well.
Yeah, I think Valentino also went through an accelerator in Austin, so he might give you some feedback there.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that's true. I should probably reach out to him for that in particular.
making connections right here.
Yeah. Certainly.
Actually, and you were mentioning, and I wonder, in China, a place like Shenzhen, which is such a hardware place and such a technology and innovation hub, wouldn't it? This is me spitting out an idea, but wouldn't it be interesting, at least for the chemical side of things and the semiconductors and everything, because it can be a place where Merck can also have a stamp of power there, I assume.
Yeah, so we're opening our hub in Shenzhen in October. October. So yeah, you're right there. You're following our process.
Okay, going back to the accelerator program. So can you explain how your accelerator program works? We already had a couple of people from Techstars, for example, but I would just like to have an idea of what's the main differences. Of course, you have different focuses, at least in terms of research.
Sure, yeah. So maybe I start off with the idea that our accelerator program is essentially a collaboration platform for startups that are eager to work with a corporate. Working in our space, so the three business sectors, and then we have three so-called innovation fields where we're looking to build up common platforms together with startups. So actually innovative solutions that could lead to joint ventures or joint developments, and these three are clean meat. So looking at lab-grown meat, livestock-free production of meat. We are looking at biosensing and interfaces, which really fits into our healthcare, life science and performance materials to a certain extent. How can you get novel sensors and the data from the sensors and actually provide insights that are either prognostic or diagnostic, that actually give you a therapeutic, they give you something to act on, essentially. And the last one being liquid biopsy. We're trying to encourage minimal to encourage reducing the invasiveness of certain diagnostic procedures. So we're looking for startups working on these new technologies that would reduce the invasiveness of certain procedures, whether it's in sample preparation, new types of biomarkers that you can track, or new bodily fluids where you can track different types of biomarkers as well.
So depending on the pathology that you're testing for, you can in theory, I assume in practice as well, but you can do some liquid biopsies using bodily fluids that otherwise you wouldn't know that they were there. But it's interesting when you mentioned non-invasive procedures and then mention biopsy. I think biopsy by its very design, it's intrusive.
Exactly, by its very nature. So we understand that there's some biopsies that I mean, you can't avoid biopsies, right? So it's essentially taking samples, but you can reduce the invasiveness of some of them, right? So, and that's what we're trying to find. Those kind of solutions that reduce the invasiveness and speed up maybe time to diagnosis as well.
It's very interesting. But going back to the question, so how does the program, is it like a 3-month program, a 6-month program?
So it is a 3 to 6 month. So we try to make it a bit flexible. The general idea, since the general idea is that we're providing a platform where you can run a proof of concept and pilot together with Merck to essentially de-risk the opportunity for our internal businesses. So usually the startups that we accept in the program have had a bit of traction within the organization. Someone wants to work with them, but is not quite sure. So what we like to run with the startup is a proof of concept of the potential relationship. So it's not building a new product together. It might be, it actually might be, but it's not about us building a proof of concept for the startup or together with the startup, but it's building a proof of concept of the relationship. So if that means if that means there's a modification to the startup technology, then yes, of course, that will mean prototyping in a new way. But the idea is that you at the end of the 3 months, there should be a clear decision from the Merck internal party as to how we and the startup as to where the shared value is, where the win-win is, and what kind of approach comes next.
Interesting.
So I think that's a slight difference to traditional accelerators like Tech, for instance. I think this is really about getting to a certain investor readiness. I think there are a lot of things that you have to think of for to actually gain traction with future investors. For us, we're hoping that you securing a relationship with Merck would mean that there's additional validation that you can go to your investors and talk about. And help you get that external boost in terms of capital.
It's a step of approval, basically.
Yeah, that's the hope. What we're hoping that many of the startups do is either gain Merck as a client, get Merck as a preferred supplier in case of some of the materials and data that we have, or actually go into joint development with Merck. For certain products or services.
So can a startup working with the Merck Accelerator, what kind of resources can a startup ask or expect? I don't want to say ask for, because then you can ask for anything, but what can a startup specifically
what can you
expect?
Get? Sure. So we offer a bit of funding, so up to €50,000 that you can leverage during the course of the program. We also offer sort of makerspace facilities. So we have 3D printers, we have laser cutters, we have things you would expect in most modern day makerspaces. We also have an AR VR studio. You can imagine why we have that now, where startups can actually prototype an environment. So that's actually accessible as well. We also have limited lab space. We're still working on sort of on bio level lab spaces, but for simple analytics and some simple experiments, we can cater for some of the startups that would like to try out some things in the lab. Here, they have access to Merck expertise as well. So they have. So we have within the accelerator, we have a team of facilitators who are also engaging with the organization, sort of trying to figure out who you need to get in touch with, how you could propose certain things to them, sort of helping you shape your pitch to them, essentially, and supporting you along the way. As you try to expand your customer base at Merck or your sponsor base at Merck, basically. So you have access to at least a Merck internal person who's guiding you through the organization and helping you open doors. So simple things like if a startup like, if Valentino, for instance, wants to talk to the head of oncology, and he asks one of us, we could try to see, when is this guy in Darmstadt or wherever we are? When is he available in the calendar? And just make a simple calendar invite, right?
Yeah.
So simple things like that would be something that the startups can benefit from. And of course, we have sessions where you can interact with our ventures team. So for those that are already looking at external financing and sort of future rounds. They get to interact with the venture team, sort of understand how they work, what kind of things they look for, and sort of get really frank feedback from an investor. So,
and one thing to ask is, so basically, Merck also can invest from a venture part, can also invest.
Absolutely.
So let's assume that I have a startup and it's 100% the future of pharmacy and the future of Merck. can I expect not only an investment, but can I expect an acquisition eventually, or an acqui-hire, let's call it? Has that happened before?
So that hasn't happened through the pipeline of the accelerator since 2015. But that has happened on
several occasions, but not necessarily through the pipeline.
Not necessarily through that. Yeah. So Merck is so we have a number of ways in which we partner with startups, and of course M&A, so acquisitions are one. Our biopharma pipeline has, to a certain extent, partially been built through some of these acquisitions as well. We have the venture arm that do strategic investments as well, and then we have things like the accelerator, where it's more about these strategic collaborations as well. But the output from the accelerator goes out to everyone in the organization as well. So the community of people who would interact with the startup from the accelerator include people who would make M&A decisions, and the people who would make venture decisions as well.
It hasn't happened doesn't mean that it won't happen, but it won't happen at least through this process. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, I have to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, and this is a personal interest. I don't know if anyone from the audience will listen, but I have a very specific diet that's very meat focused.
Okay. Yeah.
I basically eat meat every day, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
I know that it's not good for the environment, blah, 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 blah. Honestly, I don't pay attention to that argument specifically, but the question is clean meat, because you mentioned the clean meat. So you said an expression about clean meat as a non-animal farming, was something like this, right?
Yeah. And so without livestock.
Non-livestock meat creation. How does that work?
So there are quite a lot of companies at the moment that are working on different solutions. So maybe I'll give an example of a company that Merck actually invested in recently. A company is called Mosa Meats. They actually are making a beef burger without having to kill to raise and kill a cow.
Okay.
So what they've done is they've taken a biopsy earlier on in life of a certain cow, so a sample of cells, and they've been culturing these cells, and growing them, and then collecting them, and then packaging them basically like the beef patties, because I mean it's essentially minced beef, like, so a mass of cells. It's much easier at the moment. When they started it off, I think as a research project, I think partially funded by one of the Google founders, they did the first lab grown burgers. I think it was 2012 or so, and those $250,000 each US dollars. So it's still quite a way away. And now I think those costs are down to below 10,000 euros, right? So per burger. So slowly it's getting there.
That's the market's working, basically.
But the general concept is you find a way to grow these cells, whether it's in bioreactors, whether you're doing it on certain scaffolds, whether you're doing sort of a whole line of cell cultures, but the idea is that you can grow these you can grow these tissues using tissue engineering. So this is something that's been researched quite a bit in the healthcare space. People have been trying to grow organs. People have already been doing skin, right? So from back in the day, for medical purposes. And now the idea is, can you actually build the same kind of scale to feed people?
That, on a nutritional level, is it anywhere close to let's call it in quotes real meat?
So even better, right? So one of the reasons why the first term that we picked is clean meat is not only from the environmental perspective, right? So yes, the water footprint, we know, the carbon, the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions are are really ridiculous for our food production right now. But at the same time, things like pork, things like chicken and beef, most livestock production, so mass production, really includes a lot of antibiotics going into the feed cycle. There are a lot of, sorry to say this, there are a lot of feces.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
that interact with the meat that we eat during the slaughtering process.
Tasty,
right?
tasty.
So, right. That's that extra flavor. And you can imagine doing this in a factory setting, in a lab or factory setting, where you don't actually have actual animals. It becomes much cleaner, like most of the food production spaces that we have right now, where it's really a clean production line, really clean packaging. That's exactly what you would expect. I was reading a book about someone who was looking into the future of clean meat. So someone who did sort of a number of interviews as to where we are on the clean meat space. And there are some ideas that someone could say, you go to a brewery, some breweries have restaurants. And you can imagine that with meat production in the future, you could be in a brewery that has on one side the tanks that have yeast and everything that are brewing the beer, and then on the other side you've got the cells that are being cultured and cultured into meat, and those things are being produced and sort of given to you on the table, and that's not that strange, right? So
it's a little bit weird, but I like the idea at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a biotechnological process that gives you beer, and this is another biotechnological process that's going to give you meat, right? So it's, I think it's going to take a bit of education, and I think, but I think it's there are a lot of very smart people who are working on these topics, smarter than I am, obviously, which is why we're looking for them. And Merck is at the forefront of cell culture and cell culture media development, and even sort of bioreactor production. So we see that we could be a very good enabler of these kind of industries. Yeah, a facilitator of this kind of emerging technologies, and which is why we are really looking to collaborate a bit more with startups that are looking to scale faster, because I think working with them on their needs can actually help us develop the kind of tools that they require to stop just being an emerging industry and actually a scaling industry. So.
And that's a good point. And basically you're saying why it's interesting for both startups and corporations and big corporations and conglomerates to work together, because I believe, like you said, startups have a way of doing things faster and sometimes unrelentlessly that sometimes corporations cannot because of a lot of things. And before we go on, and I need to ask another thing, you mentioned organs.
Yeah, right.
Are you saying like 3D printing organs?
That could be one aspect. So I mean, we had in our last in the intake that's just passed, and one of the teams that we're currently working with are building a 3D bioprinter. So they've built quite an interesting 3D bioprinter, and they've started off with skin, but the kind of scaffold technology that they're developing could actually lead to us sort of being able to cheaply, in relative terms, be able to actually 3D print some functional organs. This may be more relevant for clinical testing, so in drug discovery, maybe not for transplantation. But I mean, there's a lot going on out there in tissue engineering that lead me to be confident that this will be pretty standard fare, right? So having people print 3D organs every once in a while.
So we're basically becoming cyborgs as time goes by. And one of the things that as soon as you said the organs parts, I remember, I don't know if you know, but probably you'll know this for way longer than I, but I saw a few years ago, there was an NBA player who ruptured his ACL. And back then, ACL tears and ruptures were still almost a career ender. And apparently there was a couple of scientists that figured out that they could 3D print from skin samples, not necessarily the ligament, but a tube that acted as a ligament capture that made the ligament, as it was reconnected, they did the surgery and everything, but they put a tube with a specific liquid that they could eventually further accelerate the ligament getting back together. They did some tests. So basically they 3D printed something microscopic to be in the ligaments of the knee, which I found that at the same time impressive, but at the same time incredible and scary. And I think that they 3D printed it with pig cells, actually, for some reason.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
For some reason. I don't know why.
The tissue engineer in me is non-existent, so I couldn't tell you either.
But isn't this so futuristic that we're in 2019 and we can be talking about something that in my mind would only happen in 500 years from now, where people could engineer ourselves. I'm fat. Let's try and remove with a vacuum cleaner, as almost all some kind of vacuum cleaner-esque, like the what's it called when people get it's not acupuncture,
you mean the
adipose tissue removal?
Yeah, adipose tissue.
Yeah. So we can do that and eventually say, I have a weak stomach. Oh, worry not. We have here a non-gluten resistant, a gluten-resistant stomach just for you.
I think behavioral change is working as well. So I suspect as we develop many of these technologies, people are getting to understand the impact of sedentary lifestyles and nutrition on health. I think we'll gradually see more and more people taking action. I don't think people will wait until these sort of so-called easy solutions come up. It would be great. I would love that.
Over the counter.
Over-the-counter slimming pill. That's straight away.
No, but imagine this.
Look, your beach body.
So, for example, I have a big nose. So you have a big nose. Here are a set of 17,000 noses collected by the newest beautiful market of the world. But I think, I don't know. I find this fascinating that I'm able to talk this and even being able to imagine it as something that I might see with my own eyes, something that it's 3700 BC. The world has been ravaged by a plague, and now everybody... This is incredible. This is unbelievable.
No, absolutely. But I think we might end up spending more time in the virtual worlds that we won't care too much.
True. That's a little bit sad. I mean, but you're now working with VR as well, so let's see. Eventually, the VR can help us get better as well. I have a question for you, actually. So, I wonder how so we already know the good things on a local level for the startups and on a specific level for Merck as well. But how does the program help Merck itself generate business and generate revenue and new opportunities outside of the main focus of pharma, component materials and everything? Do these ideas help you also build other business activities?
Yeah, absolutely. So especially when we talk about the innovation fields I was just mentioning, so clean meat, biosensing, and in the liquid biopsy space, these are places where the Merck Innovation Center, so our mother organization, is actually building new businesses. So building new ideas that turn into businesses that could scale for Merck in the future. And so for that, because we're entering into markets we might not have a big presence in. We might be leveraging technologies that we already have, expertise that we already have, but entering into slightly new market segments or novel market segments. It helps to have the speed of to aid with the speed of an agile partner like a startup. We have processes in place that allow for follow-on financing of some of these new solutions. So you can imagine that when we interact with a team that has a very, very good technology, a very good new biosensing technology, and we try to integrate that with some Merck therapeutic know-how and technologies as well, and put together a carve-out with the startup that could be jointly driven internally as an internal project with funding from our business building fund and with the expertise and the know-how that resides within Merck. So this could really speed up both us and the startups' route to market, especially if we throw in our regulatory experience, if we throw in the quality control and quality assurance mechanisms that we have, that actually could speed the way in which both companies could actually reach target customers or patients.
That's very good, and I agree. It's a very great opportunity for the speed of one place and the security and availability and resource of the other one to connect in the middle and be valuable for both. But at the same time, go to both extremes and be able to provide a lot of value in the short, medium, and long term as well.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up and start doing the final chances, we actually have, for the first time, a question of the audience. And Valentino Regale asks you one question. I asked him, how such a big pharma like Merck envisions its ability to stay updated with fast emerging new technology in order to maintain its competition on the market?
I think seeing where that question is coming from, I think that gives you a hint at part of my answer, right? So we have partnerships as one of our clear strategies to ensure that we maintain the pace of development and insights within the market and industries. We have this amazing innovation center and innovation hub model where we're trying to interact with different inventors, academia, other corporates on a partnership level to really keep up to date with what's happening in the different ecosystems and in the different sources for innovation. We're also building internal capabilities through our innovation center ideation activities and our business building activities. And clearly, we're trying to fight the war of talents as well. So always trying to attract different profiles to join the company. We recently, what's recent? 2 years ago, Merck also set up a digital office. We now have, I think, 85 more data scientists that are specifically focused on building new digital solutions, right? Than when I started. And for a company like Merck, that was really sort of most of the experts that we have are from the life sciences or chemical space. So we have people with PhDs in the life sciences and natural sciences, and a lot of people coming from the chemistry side. But of late, more of our hires actually have a digital or data science background. So the company is really reshaping itself to be a science and technology company, and trying to maintain that approach of providing the right kind of solutions based on curiosity and driven by good science.
Do you ever think that the speed and the pace of technology changes and the new technology adventures that even Merck is getting access to, that the concept of pharma company will ever be distinguished from what it is today?
So yes. So one of the premises of our biosensing innovation field is that most of the technologies that we will interact with there are going to change the way in which the pharma business model is going to work. So I think a lot more outcome driven, a lot more value is going to be extracted for a lot more value for pharma is going to be seen through the outcomes of the therapies or the solutions that we provide. So I see that digital would be a very, very so the digital plays, the sensing, all this information will sort of lead to a very, very new paradigm in which we can track more of the impact of our therapeutic interventions within patients. We can direct the right drug to the right patient at the right time in the right space, right? So, and actually get the right kind of outcome. and ensure that people have, so essentially the precision medicine approach will come to play. And this kind of approach will also lead to the payers, so insurance companies, healthcare governments, so governments and healthcare ministries, having more room to decide on the value of any therapeutic action that a pharma company or a health company. So maybe the pharma company might not be the right name, but the healthcare company would be prescribing.
What do you think it's the future actually of the pharma world? Because recently I told you that I did an interview with the founder, because you just mentioned healthcare, and the founder that I interviewed, Barnaby Parks, for the Tech Open Air podcast that I did. He said something that I found extremely interesting, and because a lot of people say that the problem with pharmacy as well, and we can have this on the podcast as well, is a lot of people say that pharmacy and healthcare are built upon a profit motive, and therefore they're built not necessarily to cure us, but to help us string along the world. And Barnaby said that we should focus on getting cures and not necessarily just healthcare, but I'm trying to get the quote. But let's put it on the other side. What's your opinion on the public perception that a lot of times people say that pharmacy is built because of the profit of motive, or the motive of profit rather, it's built on keeping us alive and not necessarily cure us?
So with that last statement, I probably thoroughly disagree. Right? So I don't think, especially, I mean, I know for a fact the people that work in the pharma space, the researchers that are in the buildings down the road here, those guys aren't that cynical. So they are spending long hours in labs, long hours in sort of with different approaches to the science to really touch on the points and figure out what kind of therapies we can bring to the patient to actually. So they are really focused. They are mission driven. Sort of pretty much like the entrepreneurs that you interact with. They are very much taking a science approach. It takes much longer. And lately, I have to say, yes, it's true. The productivity in pharmaceutical industry is decreasing a bit. Finding the right drugs is becoming more and more expensive because they're not coming at a faster pace as they used to, and there are more failures that are taking place for the targets that are in the trials phases. And to be honest, we all see it, especially in the US. Healthcare is becoming much more costlier than it's ever been.
But it's because, sorry to interrupt you, but I also see that. And I agree with you. I'm not as cynical as on this part. I truly believe that people that go through this world want to cure people. Otherwise, I don't think, yeah. I think there are simpler ways to make money. And what I seem to see, and this is my opinion on why healthcare and some even pharmacy innovation doesn't go as fast as possible right now, it's because a lot of the things have already been discovered. So when nothing was discovered, discovering one thing was an infinite times bigger, because 0 from 1 is bigger. 1 to 10, it's just 9 more. It's in theory just 9 more pills, 9 more pharmacology things, but it's 9 times or 10 times bigger than the previous one. If you go from 10 to 20, it's just 2 times. So the problem is that a lot of people, and we're now dealing at a global scale more and more on the health space, where one innovation kind of gets applied all over the world. So it's harder to maintain and to be sure that you can tackle things that are specifically for the Mediterranean biology and let's say biology, but at the same time, the way that our body responds. So I agree with you. And that's why I think it's hard. In healthcare, a lot of people, like you just said, they sit down, they don't do a lot of things. They eat bad things. They eat feces, apparently, when they eat meat. So a lot of things come with the very sedentary lifestyle that we have today. And if we can be honest, our body is not made for this. We are made to run and try and get bowls and then not eat for like 4 or 5 days.
No, absolutely. And it's one of the, and I have to say, I mean, and this is one of the reasons why we're also thinking. So a lot of Merck, a lot of Merck folks actually looking at things beyond the drugs, right? So,
exactly.
A lot of people are looking at the enabling technologies.
Facilitating.
In our case, Sorry?
Facilitating technologies.
Yeah, the facilitating technologies, right? So in our case, for instance, this is why we had a strong that we put a strong importance on this biosensing and interfaces field, because we see that also, so the kind of data that you can get from real time monitoring of how medical treatment is going, right? So you can be adaptive when the patient is not reacting. You don't just give someone 20. You don't just give someone okay, take these 20 pills and then
you'll be good.
Let's see what happens. Yeah. But you exactly right. So right now, sort of really sort of focusing on, has this treatment actually changed anything? How can we adapt it? Is it a dosage problem? So these things, if you have the right kind of sensors and the right kind of monitoring, you can adapt. You can actually track the outcomes, and this actually enables the payers at the end of the day to say, okay, I can judge the value of this drug, and I will pay based on the value.
I think that's also, and another thing that you mentioned is that it's also interesting because if you can tackle a more adaptive thing, you also have the non-invasive biopsies or the non-invasive procedures that can also measure. So you can almost have a daily adaptivity to depending on the situation that you're suffering. So that's very interesting in the future. Okay, I trust in Merck Accelerator, and I trust in Merck to bring us to a future in pharmacy and pharmacology, but also at the same time, the future of healthcare, eventually the future of well-being. And I think that's also something that you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely, and I think so just like you, I think we also really trust in the entrepreneurial space, right? So in the entrepreneurial spirit, to actually take these challenges head on, right? So if you notice the kind of healthcare professionals that enter into the entrepreneurship space, they are really driven, right? So they are really mission-focused people. They understand the issues, and they're trying to alleviate some of the problems that they see in their day-to-day, to really bring the solutions for patients. And this is the kind of thing we're trying to support as well.
Perfect. Well, Munya, before we wrap up, I have to ask you a couple of questions. I ask everyone some rapid-fire questions. So the first one is, please tell me 1 to 3 books that have impacted your life the most.
1 to 3 books. What has had the most impact for me? That's a very challenging question. If I limit it to one, I guess the value of deep work has been quite impactful in the last few years. Yeah, that's been valuable in the last few years. Yeah, I'll leave it at 1.
Okay, perfect, no problem. If I gave you 6 months to prepare for a TED Talk, and it could not be about innovation or pharmacology or biomedicine or anything, what would it be about?
It would be about, I guess, development of emerging countries. Yeah. I'm sure I'll sneak in innovation in this somehow.
It's part of it, of course. Please tell me one buzzword that you would love for the industry to stop using.
Innovation.
Munya, it was truly a lovely conversation. I really loved all the things that we discussed. And I really hope that in a couple of months we can have you back on the show, because this was a very enlightening conversation about a number of topics that I had no idea.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, for having me. This was a very, very pleasant conversation. Really loved it.
The question that I have for you is, where can people find more about you and people get in touch? And also apply for the Merck Accelerator.
So our website is accelerator.merckgroup.com. I am at Munya Chivs on Twitter. I do have an Instagram handle, but I forgot it.
Okay, perfect. Well, with that in mind, people, get in touch. Munya is a great person, and this was actually a lovely conversation. So please get in touch. And if you're in any way interested in these areas, check out the Accelerator, because I'm sure it will be a great investment of your time, but also resources. And you'll obviously learn a lot and be able to pursue a dream and vision. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for plugging into this episode. I truly hope you love this conversation as much as I did. I really hope you do reach out to Munya and get to know him. If you're a startup in the fields we mentioned, clean meat, biosensing interfaces, or other industries that you think could be interesting, apply to the Merck Accelerator in Darmstadt. This link for the application process and any other information that you might have missed will probably be linked up in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, consider subscribing to make sure that this podcast grows. We can get some more people and help everyone be the pioneers of their lives and careers. Also, if there's any feedback that you might have for me, reach out on social media and please leave a rating and review on iTunes. A big thank you to Munya for this incredibly pleasant and insightful conversation, and to Nora Welbeck from Piabo PR for arranging this conversation as well. A big shout out to DJ Rodia for the music of the Pioneers Show. So, have a nice time. Talk to you later.